Hello, spooky friends. I'm John, your host, and welcome to another episode of Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest. And today I'm so honored to be joined by one of our own in the Midwest, author Tea Krulos. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast, Tea.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, T, I don't mean to embarrass you, but you are an amazing writer. And if you don't mind, if you want to sit back for just a little bit and listen to your biography that I got off your website and everything, I think people want to hear this because you'll definitely want to check out his books, go to his website, and man, have you won a lot of awards. Holy cow. And I forgot he has a podcast too. So come on, people. When do you have any free time?
I like to keep myself busy.
Yes. So a little bit about T. He's a freelance journalist and author from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, my birthplace. Yay, Milwaukee. Although we do have Jeffrey Dahmer. Okay. Oh, wow. Some of his favorite subjects to explore, including subcultures, social movements, weird news, the paranormal, and strange personalities. And by the way, T, make sure you step in. If I'm getting anything wrong or you're like, John, that's kind of what I do, but please, anytime you want to step in and correct me, feel free.
So far, so good.
All right. So he also writes about local arts and entertainment, lifestyle, and food and drink. I love food and drink. Come on. And Milwaukee has some great restaurants for publications like Milwaukee Magazine, Shepherd Express, and Milwaukee Record. His 5 nonfiction books, and please check these books out. I will put links on the episode. Please go and support a local author and independent author because, hey, Stephen King can have all the damn money. So books are American Madness, Wisconsin Legends and Lore. We'll talk about that. Apocalypse, Any Day Now. Oh boy. By the way, I ordered a couple books. Monster Hunters, ordered that book. And Heroes in the Night. He has been published in publications like, which I use all the time on this podcast, Atlas Obscura, 14 times, and the Scandinavian Traveler. That's okay. And writes a weekly column at his website, Tia's Weird Week at teakrulos.com. And he also, I don't know how this guy, boy, he never sleeps. Tia has a Weird Week podcast, which I've listened to, and I love it. It's amazing, weird stuff on there. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. And here we go. Boy, Tia was awarded a Gold Milwaukee Press Club Excellence in Journalism Award in 2021, and you just won a recent award, correct? I want to talk about that one. Yes, last night. Let's hear about that one.
I'm a freelancer, so I write for Milwaukee Magazine pretty frequently. I would say not every issue, but almost every issue. And last year, they asked me if I wanted to write about the local surfing scene, which there are people who actually surf on Lake Michigan.
Get out of here.
Yeah, it's not very well known that happens, but there is a very devoted following. And Milwaukee has a surfing scene. There's also a big surfing scene in Sheboygan, actually. So,
love it.
So I wrote an article exploring that, and it's got nominated for the Milwaukee Press Club Excellence in Wisconsin Journalism Awards in the sports story category, which is very unusual. I don't do a lot of sports writing, but this one happened to fit. And the award ceremony was last night, and I won gold. So thank you.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
It was a very fun article to work on,
I bet it was. Surfers in Lake Michigan. I got to read that one, my friend. Yeah, I don't think, are these the same surfers like in California, like Hang Ten, dude, like, are they?
Yeah, it's very similar. Surfing on Lake Michigan, of course, has some differences. For one thing, you need to wear a well-insulated bodysuit because Lake Michigan is really cold. And it also, you need to be ready to go because it depends very much on the weather conditions. So,
Mm.
like, not every
Mm-hmm.
day is a good day to be surfing
Mm-hmm.
on Lake
Mm-hmm.
Michigan.
No,
You gotta wait until the warm air hits the cold water and produces those nice waves.
it's
So,
crazy. That's
and
crazy.
it might be good in one spot and not in another spot. So,
Mm.
I think that's kind of the appeal, is you gotta like get your board ready and hit the
Mm-hmm.
road and see where the
Mm-hmm.
surfing's good, and
Yeah, yeah,
get it
yeah.
while you can.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I've never tried surfing, but my friend tried surfing when he was in Hawaii, and he showed me his wife took pictures of it, him falling down a lot. So it's not easy, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely not easy. But like I said, 2021, you won an award in Milwaukee Magazine for
Mhm.
on Citizen Journalist,
Yeah. Yeah.
a title reporting live from the street.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Was it just talking to people who go on the street and talk to your locals and just say, what do they think of this? Or what was that about?
Well, this was kind of a trend. I don't know if people are still doing it, but with all of the protests that were going on around the
Mm,
country in 2020,
sure.
there were people who decided that they wanted to document what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So they just had their own cameras, and many of them would travel from city to city, going to protests and other events, and would live stream it. So people who are stuck at home could see what was going on outside. And these people worked independently. They
Mm,
often had a link to their Venmo or their Cash App or whatever.
yeah.
And they kind of funded it themselves. And
Oh.
some of them would sell footage to news stations as well.
Oh.
So that piece, I just kind of talked to some of the people who do this. Are kind of adrenaline junkies, I
Mm.
would say, because they're
Sure. Sure.
often
Sure.
going into situations that might be dangerous.
Mm.
So I just interviewed them, and in particular, kind of infamous night in Kenosha where protesters got shot.
Right.
They were the ones who were able to piece together what happened that night through their video footage.
Mm.
So, yeah.
That's an amazing story. I will read that story. That's sad.
Yeah.
That was a very, very sad time in Wisconsin history. And
Yes. Yeah.
if you want to go, I'm not a true crime guy, and that's kind of falls in the area of true crime. But if you want to go and look at that, my spooky friends, go and look at that. It's not paranormal, obviously, but go and look what happened after that shooting involved with I think he's not a man. I call him a boy,
Hmm.
who did this.
Yeah.
It will shock you. I don't want to give anything away, but
Yeah.
let's just keep it as that. But you picked up 2 more Milwaukee Press Club awards
Hmm.
in, I believe, 2022 Milwaukee Magazine articles.
Yeah.
This one, The Last Frame and Want to Buy a Famous Tugboat.
Yeah. Yeah, those two, the last frame was another gold winner, and that was about a bowling alley in Milwaukee called the Falcon Bowl,
Oh,
which
okay.
is over 100 years old, and it looked for a period that its future was unknown,
Mm-hmm.
um, and people were concerned that this sort of beloved institution might be going away forever.
Oh,
But
right.
people rallied, and they bought the bowling alley, and I'm glad to say an
Excellent.
update to that article is it's still operating and still a very beloved
Love it.
neighborhood hangout over there in
Love
River
that.
West.
Love it.
Yeah, and Want to Buy a Famous Tugboat, that is about my now friend Mark Gubin. He is you've probably not heard of him, but you might
Mm.
have heard of his rooftop, which reads "Come to Cleveland," and it's on the flight path to Mitchell International here in
Yes.
Milwaukee. So he has been punking people with his rooftop for over 40 years now,
Oh my God, that's awesome.
and he's a very wonderfully eccentric guy, as you can imagine,
Oh yeah.
and he has a huge collection of bizarre artifacts from throughout history,
Hmm.
including he has a tugboat that he named the Solomon Juno, and that's over 100 years old. This
Wow.
tugboat, but now he's getting to be quite elderly, and he can't maintain the boat, so
Mm-hmm.
he's hoping to sell it. So if you're listening and you want to buy a historic tugboat, he is willing to make a deal with you. More than the
All
money,
right.
he would just like to see it go to someone that will appreciate it like he did.
I could see it now. Dairyland Frights podcast on
Yes,
the tugboat. I
right.
could
You
see
can
it now.
broadcast from the boat.
Hey, there we go. And then not only are you in print, but you're in film too. You did a
Mhm.
documentary you were a
Yeah,
producer on, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm your host. You won a 2022 Rico? Is it Brico Forward Fun Award? Is that
yeah,
correct?
yes.
Yeah. So what was that one? I haven't had a chance to check it out, but I will.
Yes, that was very exciting, and it started with another Milwaukee Magazine article, actually. I had randomly run into two horror hosts, Dr. Destruction and Dedgar Winter, who both have their own shows, and they're both were based in the Kenosha area. And horror hosts, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, if you know Elvira, Sven
Mhm.
Uli,
Sure.
Joe Bob Briggs,
Oh, Joe Bob.
um, even Mystery Science Theater
Sure.
3000, I think, would
1,000.
qualify. There are shows where you have a host and they introduce usually kind of a crappy B movie,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
they make some jokes about it, and then they show part of the movie, and then they appear again, like in the segments that go to commercial. So I was familiar with the classic hosts, but I began to see more and more horror host shows in the Kenosha area, and at one point there was four that were on at the same time, and
Really?
they broadcast online, as well as Kenosha still has a cable access channel.
Oh,
So
yes. Yeah.
I was like, I think this is kind of unusual that this, Kenosha's not a huge city,
No.
and they had more horror hosts than Milwaukee or Chicago. So I started to look into it, and
Yeah, yeah.
I wrote this article for Milwaukee Magazine about this kind of unusual horror host scene, and really enjoyed working on it. And I was like, this is a very visual story because they have these
Mm-hmm.
costumes and
Mm-hmm.
homemade sets. And
Yeah.
a friend of mine introduced me to a friend, Alicia Krupski, who's a film student. And I was like, you want to take a shot at doing a documentary version of this? And we drove back and forth to Kenosha several times doing interviews and slowly put it together. We won the Brico grant, which is issued by Milwaukee Film, an organization here. And it came together, and we were able to officially premiere it at the Milwaukee Film Fest, which was just a couple weeks ago. So,
Nice. Nice.
yeah.
I remember a guy, I don't want to date myself, but here it goes. I remember a guy, American TV, when they were in business, in appliance, American TV and appliance. They had a guy, the local channel here, I believe it was in Madison, and he was on at midnight, and he would be introducing those crappy B horror movies. And I remember as a kid, I would watch that to be scared. And then I would have nightmares, and my mom would be like, "Will you stop watching that?" But I remember he looked like a really bad, and I'm a big old metalhead. I'm into like Rob Zombie and stuff.
Yeah.
He looked like a really poor man's version of Rob Zombie. And he was on there doing like this stuff, introducing the movies, and he'd do some gags, and he'd bring some people in. And I remember that. And then just one day, just went off the air. Like, this,
Huh, you
So
say that's Madison area?
yes, he was Madison.
Could have been. There's
Maybe
a classic host from there called, his name was Mr. Mephisto.
I think that was him.
Yeah.
I have to
Could
go
be.
back and check that.
Could be. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that stuff. I miss it. And I'm a big Joe Bob Briggs fan. He's still going strong. Go check, he still does stuff. You got to get Shudder. You know the way it is today. You got to you can't go on your local whatever. You got to get Shudder, and he's still on there. But now you obviously have written books because you're an author too. Here's a book, American Madness, won the National India Excellence Book Award in the current events category. His other book, Monster Hunters, was a finalist in the 2015 Midwest Book Awards. And I think that's great. And even though you're known, as you said on your website, for stories, you spotlight unusual subcultures, social movements. And then you talked a little bit about your interests, which I thought was great. You said your interests are culture, which makes sense. Sociology, art, entertainment, food and drink. Yeah, I hear you. Music, literature, comedy, small businesses, activism, hobbies. And, I just think that that's really cool. And then you have talked to everyone. This is great, from comedians to mayors to graffiti artists to fishermen to burlesque dancers to people who dress in superhero costumes and patrol the streets. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that really quickly.
Well, I think everyone has a story, or a lot of people
Yeah.
do. And when it comes down to it, I enjoy hearing people's stories, no matter who they are. So, I mean, oftentimes I'm drawn to unusual or unique people because, I don't know, that's just my thing. But I also do enjoy finding the story behind everyday people and what their life is like. So
Yeah.
I've talked to a wide range of people, and I freelance quite a bit, so it requires me to talk to a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think that's great because one of the things I started this podcast is because my love of paranormal, but I have spoken to Satanists, witches, paranormal investigators, doomsday people, you name it, authors. I would never, ever get the opportunity to do that unless I had this podcast. And when you talk to these people, well, I don't know why, but people are like, "Ooh, that guy's a doomsday prepper," or he wears a superhero costume and he's one. Hey,
Yeah.
they're just people like you, and they're trying to make a difference. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to, put themselves out there, right?
And I think in this day and age too, it feels like our country is certainly very divided,
Mm-hmm.
and and I think people hide behind their screens quite a bit.
Yes.
So I think it's important, get out and talk to people, and you start to
Yeah.
realize that you might not agree with all their ideas, but
Sure.
they're just people.
Yeah. Some of the nicest people I've ever met, T, is guys you would see or women you would see who think they're gonna kill me or something. Like they're covered with tattoos, or they're just
yeah,
big, and you talk
yeah,
to them, they're just big teddy bears. Like I know
oh
this
yeah,
one guy I work with, he was 6'5", 260, covered in tattoos. He could crush you like he'd crush a beer can. Sweetest guy ever. He one time I had some trouble when I was working with him, and he was like, "Hey, let me help you out with that. How can I help? What do you need from me?" And my wife, when I brought him over to the house one time, my wife was like, "Oh," at first, but then he started talking to him. She's like, "He's just a big teddy bear," and I'm
no,
like,
yeah,
"Yeah, you don't want to get on his bad side, okay? But if you're on his good side, he'll do anything for you. He's one of those guys you call at 3:00 in the morning. Hey man, can you come over here? I'm having, yeah, no problem. I'll be over there, no problem." And
yeah,
that's, how did I get to know that? I just walked up to him one day when nobody was talking to him at lunch. "Hey, I'm John. Nice to meet you."
yeah,
And we just started talking.
right,
So,
yeah. Oh, that's often the case. Yeah,
yeah, right. And then, like I said, your first 3 books, Heroes in the Night, Monster Hunters, and Apocalypse Any Day Now, like we're about unusual subcultures, real life superheroes, paranormal investigators, and end time preppers, procrastinators. I'm sorry, I'm really helping you with that one.
oh yeah.
I get
You got it right. Prognosticators, someone that
Yeah.
predicts the future.
Yeah, which I love too. And you can look where they've been published and stuff. One thing you did, American Madness, is about a conspiracy theory culture and how it has ruined people's lives. And that
Mm,
was published in 2020.
mm.
Can you tell a little bit more about that? Because I am a big conspiracy guy, but I also believe they can ruin people's lives,
Yeah,
especially the satanic panic, which I haven't covered yet, which I want to
yeah,
cover one of these days, because I believe over 20 people went to jail because someone said it's Satan. I'm like,
yeah,
what?
yeah,
Are you insane? Like, what are you? It's innocent people going to jail, spending years in jail over someone going, "Yeah, it was Satan."
yeah,
What?
yeah.
What?
I do.
Go ahead.
American Madness. I do talk about the Satanic Panic a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, I just give kind of a short summation of what it was. But I started that book. That was the longest I spent writing anything. I started working on it in 2010,
Hmm.
and it got published in 2020. So it started because at that time in 2010, I was working on my first book, Heroes in the Night, which is about this unusual group of people called real-life superheroes that adopt their own superhero persona, and some of them actually go out and try to fight crime on the street.
Love it.
And some aren't that intense. Some do more of like
Sure.
a charity thing or something.
Sure. Right.
So anyhow, I'm working on this book, and I get a message from a guy named Richard McCaslin, and he said, because I was doing a blog that was kind of updating my progress on this, right? You know, I met Green Scorpion the other week, and we hung out, that type
All
of
right.
thing.
Nice.
And he says, I think you'd be interested in talking to me because I have the superhero persona that I created, Phantom Patriot, and I actually raided a place called the Bohemian Grove, and I went to jail because of it.
Ooh.
And I was like, what is this guy talking about? I'd not heard of the Bohemian Grove or anything like that. So I looked it up, and it is essentially a campground for very wealthy, powerful men. Many presidents have been members, a lot of CEOs, politicians. And it's in Northern California. And every summer they have a retreat there. And they kick things off by having this kind of unusual ritual in front of a giant statue of an owl, the great owl of Bohemia. And because it's a secret club, of course, there's a lot of conspiracies about this place. So Richard had gotten hooked on Alex Jones, who was just starting his career.
Okay.
And he saw a documentary, quotes documentary, that Alex Jones had made about the Bohemian Grove. And he took it very literally. He got very upset because he believed that they were sacrificing humans in front of this owl. So he created this character, the Phantom Patriot, which was this kind of frightening skull mask and a jumpsuit. And he very heavily armed himself. He had an assault rifle, a pistol, a samurai sword, a smoke bomb launcher, a crossbow. And he went to this place and raided it. And, security guards saw him and called the police. He had a very tense standoff with the police where he almost died.
Oh boy.
And they arrested him, and he spent 6.5 years in jail.
Yikes.
And he got out, and I met him a couple times.
Okay.
And, I think I was interested because he was such an unusual character. But, I quickly discovered that his conspiracy ideas, a lot of people believe this stuff. So I kind of wanted, the project became getting to know Richard, trying to understand why he believes some of these things, where they came from, and stuff like that. And, sadly, I think the conspiracy weighed down on Richard so much that eventually, and this is kind of a spoiler for the book, he took his own life.
No.
Yeah. So
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, I only hope that, people can read it and maybe understand, what's going on here.
Yeah, and there's been some dangerous ones. Pizzagate, which is a really weird one. So Pizzagate, Bohemian Grove, I might do something on that. I'm not too... it's interesting, though. But Pizzagate, what happened was, it was just made up. Someone said a conspiracy that there's a pizza place, the basement of this pizza place. These politicians are like, I don't know, baby's blood. It was just really bad.
Child trafficking in the basement.
It was really bad. Yeah. So this one guy took it seriously, like your friend there.
Very similar story to Richard. Very similar.
Yes. And went and shot out, I believe, a window. I don't think he hurt anybody. I'm not really sure on the story. I have to go back. But it was just that someone got so worked up and said to themselves, I got to do this. The other thing was with, too, there's been other conspiracies out there where people have said, for instance, Area 51. We do know Area 51 has secret government projects there, and they did a thing, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. Well, let's storm Area 51, and millions of people got on. Let's get them. And the government was legitimately concerned, like, What are we
Yeah.
going to do? We can't start shooting people in the streets and
Right.
like start giving the army to show up there. And like 100 people showed up and they had goofy signs and some guys were in their underwear being stupid. And
Yeah.
luckily nobody got hurt. There were a few people arrested. But the problem is, and you can get into the insurrection, January with the government.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different podcast, which I don't do.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is with conspiracies, it's good, I feel, to bring them out and let people go, huh, okay.
Yeah.
That's scary. That's really frightening. But is there really this happening or that happening? But if it brings light, there is sex trafficking, there is child trafficking. We know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it brings to light that you're sitting at home one day and you say to yourself, how can I help? Like without violence, like how can I help? Can I maybe work for an organization that deals with child trafficking and I can take my time, or maybe I can work with people who have been trafficked and help them find a home, you know what I mean? Get back into life. Let's
It's much
use it
more constructive. Yeah.
Yeah, let's use that constructively, okay? And
Yeah.
if there really is some people out there doing crazy stuff, yes, there's been kids who have Slender Man, for example, which I had on one of my shows, where an innocent girl was stabbed because these two little girls thought there was a Slender Man and they would go to the Shangri-La or heaven or whatever you want to say,
Yeah.
and they actually did it. Okay, right in your backyard. These are the kids right, who did that. Now, flash forward, again, good ending. One of the girl who got stabbed is going to college. She totally forgives those two girls. Totally forgives them. She's like, hey, I was young, whatever. But again, if you watch documentaries on this, certain people kind of allowed that to happen and kept pushing them. And one of the girls was schizophrenic. She had some mental issues, which is good for the parents in a sense that they know their little girl has issues and mental issues, so they can get her the help she needs so she doesn't do this again or maybe worse. So again, I think that's really interesting to write books about that, and especially that it's in your backyard. This isn't happening like just in New York or LA or some of the big. This is happening in your backyard as we speak. Your neighbor is doing maybe things that you're like, maybe I should try to help them or talk to them. I don't know what the answer is. All I do know is that we should look at this for a more constructive way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely. Go ahead.
Like you say, there is real conspiracy.
Yeah.
Not all of it's made up. Certainly our government's done a lot of really messed up stuff.
MK Ultra comes to mind.
Exactly. Yeah, that's an example I give in the book. I talk about some conspiracies that were real. But I think we're really in a critical stage where people need to learn some media literacy because there is so much completely fake stuff that gets circulated. A lot of times it's circulated because they're hoping it's going to damage someone politically or they just are trolling, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
I see people get fooled by some obviously fake stuff, including myself. I've been fooled before.
So
certainly.
So have I. Yeah. Now, this is a book I ordered, and I ordered the last book because I love conspiracy, and I love this, Wisconsin Legends and the Lore, 2020. Yeah. It's a collection of Wisconsin folklore. So talk a little bit about that. I'm sure I just read a little bit of it, kind of a blurb. But, Hodag, Beast of Bray Road, stuff like that. Is there anything else you kind of want to talk about that makes Wisconsin such a great state for all these legends and lore?
It really is. And I haven't done my podcast in a while, but I was doing that regularly with my friend Heidi Erickson. And we often commented about how unusual Wisconsin is. It's hard to find places that compare to it exactly, but it's so rich with storytelling, which I love, of course. And I think we just have this great culture for it.
Yes.
Dating back to indigenous people, had a lot of really interesting stories, especially about how certain parts of Wisconsin were formed, oftentimes by these monster-like creatures like thunderbirds and lake serpents, and then we had all the settlers who brought their stories from Germany and Ireland and Poland and all over the place. And we have a very strong tavern culture here. So a lot of people
Yes.
like to sit around and drink and tell stories.
Yes, we
So
will talk about that. I didn't read this all in your book. Have you ever heard of a story maybe you put it in there, called Haunchyville?
yes, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, that's
okay,
in
good.
there.
Great. I love
I
that.
tried to visit Haunchyville.
How'd that go?
I did not find the haunchies.
Yeah.
So the story behind this is from Muskego, I think, right? Yeah,
I believe
yeah.
so. Yeah, I'm trying to look
Muskego
it up
is
here. Yeah.
it's in the Milwaukee area. It's kind of one of
Yes.
the outer suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
But supposedly you go to the end of Mystic Lane, which is a real
Mm-hmm.
street, and you'll
Yes, it
find
is.
a village of very angry little people
Mm-hmm.
who will chase you out. And the stories vary quite a bit, but in some
Yeah,
stories they have a very tall albino bodyguard that
correct.
protects them and has a shotgun. Some stories say they'll cut off your legs because they're angry that you're tall, or so it's an urban legend. And
Yes.
me and a friend, I was probably late teens, early 20s. Me and a friend drove out there because we wanted to see what was going on. And we did see some small stone huts. I think this is probably where the urban legend started.
Yeah.
I think that they're just garden sheds or something.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
But they look like, could be little cottages.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a stop sign that's very low to the ground.
Below the
So it
ground,
looks.
yeah.
So I think people's imaginations, you know how it goes. Someone makes up one part of the story and then they pass it along. Next thing you know, there's this huge mythology behind this.
Yeah, I love
And
it.
sadly now, I think that's an urban legend that's going to be lost to the ages because
Yeah.
that area has now been developed into like
Yeah.
a subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no mystery there anymore.
Yeah, so my spooky friends, I always give warnings to my spooky friends when we talk about graveyards and everything. What I say to them is, remember, this is private property, folks. So do not do that. And cops, they're gonna arrest you because you're trespassing, or at least, So
Yeah, I
maybe
almost
not
wonder.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have this is a conspiracy, and maybe the police invented the story just so they can make money handing out trespassing tickets because they are known to do that.
I love it. I love it. So we'll come back to that because I think it's really, really interesting. And then you also wrote, this ain't paranormal, but a very interesting, Brady Street Pharmacy Stories and Sketches, 2021. Short memoir of a greasy spoon. Love greasy spoon diners, which they're not around that much, unfortunately. A pharmacy counter you worked at in your youth. So, there you go.
Yeah, that was a fun little project. I didn't have big expectations that it was going to be an incredible bestseller or something, but I did work at this diner. It was called the Brady Street Pharmacy on the east side of Milwaukee. And it was your classic greasy spoon pharmacy counter. There was a small convenience store in it as well. And I worked there from about the time I was 20 till about the time I was 30. So I worked there for all of my 20s. And it was a place that had a lot of unusual characters that hung around there. So I had all these stories that I would like to tell my friends over the years about, this guy came in and he did this weird thing or whatever. And at one point I was like, you should write those stories down because you're starting to forget some of the details.
Sure.
So I just, spent time here and there writing some short stories about the regulars and my coworkers and myself a little bit, and it turned into a little book.
No, that's great, because again, greasy spoons are a lost art. Good luck trying to find one. You have to drive around and but I get it. It's really hard. I live here in Spring Green, Wisconsin. And it's we do have some, but it's like we have an old dive bar, Baron Brooks. It's been there forever. It's where you can go in, get a burger and a brew, and most people are just talking about sports and life and but it's still interesting that it's there, and I love that it's there. Again, corporate America has not destroyed everything we love. but that's a whole
Yeah.
different podcast. I
Yeah.
got some questions for you, T. First of all, did you always have the desire to be an author? Did you always like, hey, this is something I want to do?
I think so. I didn't quite know that it was possible, but when I was young, I was a very avid reader.
Mm-hmm.
And I really have my dad to thank for that. He would read me stories a lot and got me interested in reading.
Mm-hmm.
And even at a young age, the stuff that I like to read, superhero comics, any
Nice.
book I could find about UFOs or Bigfoot or ghosts. I read a lot of juvenile adventure stories, mystery, and stuff like that. So I've always had a love for these topics, I think. And I started to write a little bit in high school. I was on the high school newspaper
Nice.
thing, and I made my own zines, which are these like kind of small self-published
Oh,
publications.
right,
And,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
You,
yeah.
you were the kid who went in when everybody's reading sports, or you said you're going, because I heard I do this too, and I heard some of my guests do this too, and check out book on ghosts. I think
Yeah.
the librarian would be like,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I'd be like, UFOs, woo! Like, I'd be like, ghosts and UFOs. And when I was a little kid, I'd be like, librarian, can you get more of these? And they'd look at me, sure, John. Yeah, okay. We'll get more of those. Yay! And my mom, she was very good too. She would buy stuff for my birthday and stuff. Although my mom, I remember the first time she was reading a book about Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield. And I said to my mom, I was like 12, what is that? And my mom didn't hold back. And it's a different parenting, right? And she didn't hold back. And she told me and showed me pictures. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of interested in that too. So, she inspired me that. Well, let me ask you another question. What inspires you to keep writing? Like, it's really hard in today's world because there's so much, right? YouTube, this, that, and Amazon, blah, 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 and on and on and on. And anybody can be an author, right? Anybody quote, right? What inspires you to be like, I love talking to these superheroes and these burlesque dancers and whoever else, right?
I mean, it's something. It's a passion of mine. I mean, there's like this unbeatable feeling when you're digging into a story and it's going well. I mean, it doesn't always go well. Sometimes it's got challenges for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're on track with a good story,
Mm-hmm.
it's very exciting that you're able to do that and share it with people and help explain some part of this world that we live in.
Yeah. So let's go into that, because I do have authors listening to this, as well as wannabe authors like yourself, who's very accredited and has won a number of awards and has success in it. What would you say to them? Like, how do you know it's a good story? Like, you could do anything, right? You could literally do, like, I can write about this building. I can write about this lake. I can write about legends and lore. How do you go about saying, okay, this is a good story, it has some legs to it, or whatever you want to say, meat to it? How do you go about that? And do you research?
I mean, I think it depends a little bit, but things that excite me about getting into a story, one would be it's not something that's been done to death. Like, there's a lot of topics that have been written about so much that I don't think I would be able to add anything new to it. I think a lot of stories have some sort of emotion at the heart of it. You gotta care about the people that you're reading about.
Sure.
I mean, I guess not. There's a lot of historical writing. Well, even then, you kind of want to find something that people can connect to.
Sure.
But
yeah,
you gotta find an interesting topic and something that you would be good at writing about too. Like there's topics I wouldn't be good at writing about, so I just wouldn't get into it.
Yeah. So let's go to the old staple of write what you know. When you're talking about that to a young author and they go, hey, T, I'm like, I want to be an author. I want to do this. And they keep telling me, write what you know. Well, all I know is baseball. I'm just going to throw that out. All I know is baseball. what would you say to that person? You're like, okay, you know baseball. This is my suggestion, what you should do.
If someone's really into baseball and they want to write about that, I would, I would say keep your eyes open for an interesting story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's telling the story of a particular player who had to overcome adversity in their life, but had that passion and drive that made them a success. Or look for an interesting chapter of history. There certainly has been many in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
It could be like a scandal. Like if you're
Sure.
looking at some of the classic baseball scandals,
Mm-hmm.
or a team that had an incredible season. You might write about that season in particular
Yeah.
and try to
Yeah.
interview people with that. It's it does require a lot of like exploring, and
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have some false starts and ideas that aren't gonna pan out. But if you
Mm-hmm.
keep looking, I think you'll eventually will connect with something
Yeah.
that works.
I would say to that person, look up the Pfister Hotel in Milwaukee and
Yeah.
then go and talk to the baseball players, grown men who
Yeah.
are like 6'3", 250, can bench press a house and have said, and I quote, I will never stay there again. It is haunted
Yeah.
and forget it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an
There you go.
angle, right? That's a different angle for you.
It is. It is.
Talking
Yeah.
to sports players who say, I won't stay at that place. It is haunted. There's many, 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 many haunted hotels across the United States and the world. I do have one for you, Tia, that I was going to suggest right now if you give me this pleasure. There is the legend of albino cannibals in Hummel Park in Ohio, and no one's ever done a story on them. I did a podcast on them. There's this Hummel Park. It used to be a Hummel Park. So I love this story for my paranormal. You can go back and listen to the episode. So when you go into this park, the first thing is the entrance to the park. The marker looks like a gravestone. It just says Hummel Park. And then the trees are like bowed over. And supposedly they're bowed over because this is, okay, a little golden time here. Kiddies, take off your headphones. Is they would hang slaves from these trees. So the trees bowed over, and you can hear still the screams of the slaves trying to survive, and get loose. The other thing, and this is my favorite, two favorite things. First, there are albino cannibals in the park, which, of course, it was an older family who lived in this park, and they basically became cannibals. Not much of a story behind there, but you could research it and find out. And last but not least, there is a stairway to hell in the park that when you get to the top, though supposedly doesn't happen all the time, but a portal opens, Satan comes out and grabs you and takes you to hell. So come on, T, let's go.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard this story, but it definitely piques my interest. And when you look into it, sometimes there is. You discover like an urban legend kind of grew around an actual thing.
Yes,
like maybe there was a family of albinos who hung out there, and this rumor started about them, and it evolved.
Yeah. So last but not least, before we get to the the paranormal.
Yeah.
How did you go about publishing your first book? Like, what did you do to get that published? Because that's not easier. It's easier said than done, I believe.
It is, yeah. It's tough. And I think a lot of writers probably drop out because the process is very tough. No one likes to be rejected. And if you're trying to sell a book, you're going to be rejected. I guarantee it. So I got rejected so many times. I can't even count. But, I believed in the book. So I was working on it without having any sort of deal for years. I would just kind of save up money, and then I would take a long weekend and go out to New York and hang out with the New York Initiative. Was a team out there, or I would go to, I went to San Diego, and I went all over. And, I kept looking at publishers, and then I found one that I thought might be a good fit, which was Chicago Review Press. They're a mid-sized publisher out of Chicago, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that one of their editors was an author himself,
Mm.
and he had written not like the Weird Wisconsin. His series was called Strange. He wrote Strange Wisconsin, Strange Illinois, Strange
Yeah.
Ohio.
Right.
Jerome Poland is his name. And I was like, well, this guy at least appreciates strange stuff, I would guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you write what's called a book proposal. It's pretty much an outline of your book. And I sent it to him, and he said, all right, we're going to do it.
That's, yeah.
Yeah,
So
they
getting
published
out
my first
there.
3 books. Yeah.
Yeah. So getting out there, right?
Yeah.
Getting out there, networking, finding people that maybe in your kind of same line, author or somebody upcoming, right? Maybe that's a good way to do it too. And
you need to understand the perspective. If you're sending something to a publisher, they get mounds and mounds of submission every day. A lot of times they don't even really read them. They just kind of like get the gist of it, and they're like, nope, 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 nope. So you've got to have a thin skin. If you get a rejection letter, you can't be like, oh, I'm a terrible writer, I shouldn't be doing this. You got to be like, all right, I got this rejection, I need to move on and try to find the right connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's tough. It is really tough.
Yeah. But yeah, right. You say you just gotta be persistent. You gotta keep going. You gotta be able to handle rejection, and know at the end of the day, you talk to a superhero, you talk to whoever, a doomsday prepper, that you go, huh, I never really thought about that. And, that's, to me, that's a great thing, right? Like I said, I talked to a woman who's a practicing witch from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd ever do that.
Yeah.
Talk to her. She's an amazing person. She's a nice person. She's a mom with 3 kids. Now, when you hear witch from the Netherlands, what's your thing? You think she's in a basement sacrificing babies and probably black, has black shroud over her head. And no, she's just a mom, just trying to make it, and she just believes in this stuff and it makes her stronger. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I didn't know that. So let's talk a little bit. Let's get into the paranormal. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, tell me about a paranormal experience you have had. And it can be something, well, I thought I saw a ghost or a shadow, whatever. What paranormal experiences have you had? And share it with my audience.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it's fairly new to me. And well, it is and it isn't. Like I mentioned, when I was a kid, I loved to read about this stuff. I read about Bigfoot, UFOs in particular. When I was a teenager, I think X-Files was popular, and I was very interested in real UFO cases. Yeah. So I read a lot about it. And then I finished my first book about the real-life superheroes. My publisher at Chicago Review Press, they're like, and this was very encouraging to hear. They're like, you did a really great job with this book. We want to sign you up for another one. What do you want to do? And I had a couple ideas, but the one that really stuck out, I was like, I've kind of seen these guys on TV on shows like Ghost Hunters, and I know that there's people who are dedicated to investigating paranormal stuff, and I'm really curious about that. I would love to go on some investigations, find out what this is all about. Are these people credible? Are they quacks? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And they approved that because paranormal stuff, is kind of a hit. There's a lot of hit shows and books and stuff. And so I got to work, and I hooked up with a group here locally called the Paranormal Investigators of Milwaukee. And I pretty much approached them, and I was like, how would you feel if I tagged along with you for like a year or a year and a half? And they, they thought over and they agreed. So I ended up doing a lot of ghost investigations with them. I also traveled around. I went to the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine, and got to meet Lauren Coleman, who has authored dozens and dozens of books about cryptids. I went to the Mothman Festival.
Oh, nice.
I went to the International UFO Congress, which is a big UFO convention in Arizona. And so there was a couple of weird things that happened during all this.
Okay.
One was I joined the Paranormal Investigators of Milwaukee to investigate a place called Bobby Mackey's Music World, which
Oh,
is
love it.
a famously haunted location in Kentucky. And it's creepy. It's a creepy place. And it's supposed to have a portal to hell and all sorts of stories. A guy at one point tried to sue the bar because he claimed the ghost beat him up in the men's room. And yeah, there's all these stories, and it was a very creepy night. And I didn't experience anything directly, but a member of the team, who I think is not someone who fabricates stuff, she started crying at one point and said that she had lost her sight and the feeling in her hands. And another person on the team at one point felt like they were being possessed by an angry spirit. And on another trip that they had made, I wasn't there with them, but someone actually got pushed against the wall by an unseen force. It's it was creepy. But the big experience I had was actually, this was getting towards the end. I had a deadline approaching, and I was like, okay, there's one more thing I want to do, which is I want to get out there with a Bigfooter and see if we can find Sasquatch,
Yeah.
So Lauren Coleman suggested that I talk to a researcher named Jim Sherman, who lives in Michigan, and he is a member of the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, which a lot of people know. It's kind of represented on Finding Bigfoot. It's a big organization. Right. And Jim is a great guy, very normal guy. I mean, he's a high school history teacher. He's a track coach, and just looks like the most normal guy that you can imagine. But, on the weekend, he loves to go out in the woods and see if he can find Bigfoot. So he was like, okay, there's this property here in Michigan that I've been to a couple times, and there's weird stuff going on there. So I'm going to go there later this month. If you want to meet me there, we'll spend the weekend looking for Bigfoot. I was like, great, this is just what I wanted. So the last night we were there, we had this really wild night. I was about to go to sleep, and I heard this blood-curdling scream, and we don't know what that was. Like, it could have been a coyote or something.
Sure.
But we don't know. But anyway, I was very frightened. I got out of my tent. I thought for sure I was going to see Bigfoot standing there. Jim was in his Jeep, so I go over to his Jeep, and we're sitting there, and he was like, "Did you hear that?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I heard that. It was really loud." Like scream, and then there was this like banging on the ground, like something was running away.
Ooh.
But this is not the weird thing that happened. Okay. What happened then is I'm looking out the window of the Jeep at the field because I'm seeing if there's some big shape walking around. I'm like, oh man, that must have really scared me because I'm shaking. The star in the sky is shaking.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, no, it's something moving. And it was this big ball of light that was like hovering and bobbing up and down, and then it would like zip over a pretty significant distance, and it would hover there, and then it would zip over here. And once in a while, this very strong light was coming out of the bottom of it. And we both got out. We looked at it through binoculars for quite a while. We got video of it. The video is terrible because we can't focus on it. And follow it, but it was very strange, and I'm not saying it was the alien mothership necessarily, but I got to experience what it's like when you see something like that, because everyone was like, so you were out in the sun with a Bigfooter guy, and then you saw this UFO, and they're like, it was probably a drone. I was like, first of all, this is at like 3 a.m, and it did not move like a drone can move. Or any aircraft that I know of. So
it was a weather balloon, Tia.
Right. Hey, yes. Yeah.
Weather balloon with swamp gas.
Yeah.
So your book covers one of the my favorite topics. Is I had on some paranormal investigators from Whitewater, and we were talking about the witches of Whitewater, and people are like, "What?" My sister went to Whitewater, and she related some stories to me. to, that were like, okay, like nobody went near this tower. It's called the Witch's Tower.
Yeah.
Boy, help me out here, Tia.
Yeah.
Like, here's the stories I've heard. What they told me was there was a woman. She was not convicted, but think she's that she was a witch. I can't remember her name, but if you can kind of help me out, kind of fill in the blanks here, because it was done a little while ago. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I wrote about that in my book, Wisconsin Legends and Lore, which was really fun to work on. But like we were saying before, a lot of these stories, they come from somewhere.
Yes.
And in this case, Whitewater was home to the Morris Pratt Institute,
yes,
which was a school for spiritualists. And it was built in the late 1800s when spiritualism was fairly popular.
Yes.
But of course, in somewhat of a small town of Wisconsin, it was viewed as being weird, for sure, that these people had built a school where they had normal classes. You could take classes in like math and geography, but they also had classes on how to communicate with the dead and, how to stage a seance and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the locals nicknamed the school the Spook Temple, and they started speculating. And they were the school maybe harmed themselves because they were a little bit, they weren't very open about what they were doing.
Yeah.
Maybe they should have had some open houses or something like that.
Right, exactly. Come on in. Check out the seance.
Right. But people then started, they're conjuring up ghosts and they're witches. And those stories began to evolve. That's these witches from the school would hold a black mass in front of the witch's tower on campus, and the library at the college supposedly has this book, a spell book that they keep locked up, and you can't see it because if you do, you'll go insane from the magical power that it has. So all these stories started, and especially being a college town, I think a lot of college kids probably hazed each other by telling each other scary stories about what was happening. And there's even, it's called the Witch's Triangle. There's 3 cemeteries in town, and they form a triangle because any 3 points do. and supposedly inside of this triangle is where all this weird stuff happens. And there's a story about a ghost of an axe murderer who appears in one of the cemeteries. Lots of stories.
I love it. I absolutely love it. One of the things too, the people that were on when they went to the school, and when they were younger, there's a barbed wire fence around it. You're not supposed to go around. I don't know if they've changed it recently. Hopefully they have. But anyway, they're kids, so they tried to go in it, and they got scared. But one of the things he related to me was when he was trying to jump over the fence, he felt someone pull him back. He said, "John, when I jumped on the fence, it was like someone was pulling me back, and I thought it was my buddy, just doing it because he's afraid I would hurt myself or whatever." But he says, "No, John." He goes, I fell back. I looked back. There's nobody there, John. There's absolutely nobody there. And so they get over there, and he says he had to limp for a week because he jumped the fence and got caught, on his pant leg, and he fell. But he said, he swear to God, he said, "John, I saw weird shadows in the campus after that." He goes, it was really, really freaky. Flash forward, this guy does a tour for Wisconsin Whitewater every Halloween and during October, where you can go on a ghost tour of Whitewater, go to the Witch's Tower, go to the Triangle Cemetery, go and see other things. And I thought that was so funny. I was like, so wait a minute, you got an actual experience, and now you're actually doing a tour. And he goes, yeah, and he goes, and we're paranormal investigators, from time to time, we like to go there. And they've gotten some interesting EVPs and some other things, which is right, just Witches in Whitewater. Not to mention, I found a film called The Witches of Whitewater that a local director, producer, independent guy tried to make. There is a trailer out there that I put with the episode when it was on my podcast. That was a really, really good trailer. Of course, it's Hollywood, not in Hollywood, but it's indie horror. So
Yeah.
you can't be like, hey, there's witches and they're bad. No, you had to show like blood. You had to show a Ouija board. You had to
Right.
show people like, oh, look out, the witches are trying to, whatever.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. A very fun place to visit there, by the way. Because of the spiritualist school, Whitewater got the nickname Second Salem,
yes.
and so I don't know if they're still open. I hope so. But there's a
Yeah.
Second Salem Brewing Company, which brews their own beer, and they have food.
Nice.
And it's nice because the beers all tie into the local lore. So there is like a Witch Tower ale, and Elkhorn's not too far up the road. So there's a Beast of Bray Road beer that they have, and the art is really fantastic for
I'll check that out.
the labels.
I'll
Cool
definitely
spot.
check that out. So do you have a favorite legend or lore?
I mean, there's so many that I really like. The Beast of Bray Road, of course, is a great story.
Yep.
The Hodag, I was glad to see Hodag was a clue on Jeopardy recently.
Yes, we're famous.
And so that's a fun story. I haven't been there, but I know the guys who run it. There's a very cool Hodag store that you can visit in Rhinelander that has, shirts and toys and Hodag vodka and all sorts of stuff. But, the Pfister Hotel, too, like you mentioned, that's a story that I like. I should mention, I am a tour guide for American Ghost Walks.
Oh, Mike Huberty. I had him on the show. Yes.
Yeah. I'm one of his employees here in Milwaukee. We have a third ward tour downtown, and then another downtown tour called the Shadow of City Hall. And we actually stop by the Pfister Hotel. And that, of course, is one of the favorite stops on the tour, just because the stories are so good. And we have a chance to walk through the lobby so people can check it out for themselves.
Yeah.
But there's also lesser known stories I really like.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Christmas Tree Ship.
Yeah. Tell me more about it.
It's a great story. Before the rail system was really in place, and certainly before we had trucks, people would go up to the UP, northern Wisconsin area, harvest Christmas trees, and then they would sail down the lake to Chicago and dock there and sell the trees right off the boat. So it was known, the ship was the Rouse Simmons, but it was known as the Christmas Tree Ship. But one November, they got a little bit too ambitious. They loaded the ship up with, thousands of trees, and the ship was not in great shape. And Lake Michigan can be very dangerous, especially in the winter.
Absolutely.
So the ship went down, all hands were lost, and Christmas trees washed up to shore for years that followed. And the story is that, on a stormy winter night, or sometimes specifically on the dates that went down, which was sometime in November, I don't remember, but you can see the ghost of the ship sailing down Lake Michigan, trying to make its way to Chicago. And eventually they did find the ship. It wasn't until the 70s, but a scuba diver found it and got some very eerie images, because the trees are still in the ship, but all of their needles are gone. So you have these very skeletal looking trees packed into the ship. So I just like a good maritime ghost story. It seems very classic, and it's kind of an interesting but not very well known ghost story here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I just did the Lake Michigan Triangle a couple episodes ago, where numerous ships, a plane in the 80s, 70s, 80s crashed in there, and it hit it so hard that just obliterated the plane. And then thought UFOs were tied to it. In Lake Michigan, they have ley lines. People are familiar with that. Like I said, it's kind of magnetic forces, and it's crazy. It's a huge lake too. And I was just like, wow, I got to do this. I've never heard of Lake Michigan Triangle. And like yourself, I like to try to do, things maybe it's not top of mind, like Amityville or, Salem Witch Trials or something that's been done to death, right? Certain poltergeist stories. One of the other things, too, is I think you did something like this. Correct me if I'm wrong. but I did a story on Mineral Point Vampire and the Ridgeway Ghost, which is I love those. Those are
Yeah.
just great. Those are great. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mentioned both of those in Wisconsin Legends and Lore. Just short entries on each of those. Ridgeway Ghost is great because I believe that's the oldest ghost story in the state. It's a story that's been told for many generations now. There's a variety of different stories about it, but they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
Some pretty classic ghost stories. Guys are playing poker, and then a ghostly hand deals himself in and terrifies the whole bar. And I love it. I also very much love it when cities embrace those stories.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Ridgeway, it's a small town, but their water tower has a ghost.
A little ghost on it. Yes.
So a little tribute to their famous ghost story there. Yeah.
And they also have every June or July, they have a Ridgeway Ghost little, parade, rock run. They have a little thing they give the charity. Rylander has the Hodag. So I wanted to ask you though, before we wrap up here, have you done Chicago Cigar Bar? Have you done that? Because that's haunted. Right?
Shakers,
yeah.
Shakers, yeah.
Yeah, Shakers.
I wrote briefly on them in Wisconsin Legends and Lore too. I have a section where I just give you like the top 5 haunted bars in the state, and so they definitely made that list. I've been there a few times. It's a very interesting place. It's very beautiful because it looks exactly like it probably did over 100 years ago. So it did used to be a speakeasy and a brothel, and they've really played that up. They do their own tours there. They have a lot of claims about ghosts. I don't know how many of those are what's true and what's maybe not. But it's a cool place to visit. If you hate cigar smoke, probably not a great place
for you. Yeah,
because it's the only building that you can smoke in Milwaukee. So
yeah. Have you done anything about the Wonder Bar in Madison? Because that was Al Capone and everybody kind of hung out there supposedly. Yeah, gangs.
I know of it, and I wrote briefly about it in the book as well. And what little I know about it, I think probably heard from Mike Huberty.
Yes,
because I know that they include that
in
the
Madison.
Story of that in their tour in Madison. So I haven't been there, and I believe, if I'm right, it's closed now, right?
Correct.
Oh man, I'd really like to check it out, and especially they have like some story behind. There's a painting of a woman in the bar that.
Yes.
There's some significance to that.
And people who have been there, Mike was telling me a story about people taking pictures of what they believe is Al Capone, like an apparition of a gangster, like a guy with a fedora, long coat on, just what you would see as a gangster. But people have said, they have felt, they've been pushed. They've been, grabbed. They've been, and I don't, the bar closed down not, just to make it clear to all my spooky friends out there, the bar closed down not because of that. It closed down because, we're into all these different things nowadays. So we just don't go to these bars anymore, right?
Yeah. And especially, pandemic era was very,
very
tough for businesses. Al Capone's ghost, by the way, he gets around. In fact, I think I wrote an article called like Al Capone's ghost gets around or something like that, where I mentioned some of the various places he's been seen at Alcatraz, and Chicago certainly. He did hide out in the North Woods of Wisconsin.
Yes,
there's a lot of places associated with him.
Absolutely. So Tia, I could talk to you for hours. You're awesome. We have some great stories. I'd love to have you back on. There's a bunch of things I didn't talk to you about. But what do you got coming up? What do you got? What you can tell my spooky friends you got they can check out?
I'm working on developing some book projects. There's nothing that's really solidly moving forward at this point. I have my hand in a couple of documentary projects too, continuing to freelance articles from Milwaukee Magazine, Atlas Obscura. So I'm busy with a lot, but no like major project that's
Okay,
rolling
great.
out soon. People
Yeah.
should certainly check out my website, teakrulos.com. I always update with new stuff there.
Yes, please check that out. I am a subscriber now. I love it. I love that I was brought to someone brought me to your attention because there's so many great authors and everything that I'm discovering here in the Midwest, and I've just touched that just brief surface that I love having, especially Midwesterners who can talk about, who've lived here all their lives and you talk about all the crazy stuff that happens here and that people don't get it. People are kind of like, oh, really? I never thought Midwest was like, oh, it's unbelievable. Cryptids, ghosts. We had 2 serial killers that have influenced movies and books and my gosh, just on and on and on and on. You can find something, whether true crime
Yeah.
or ghosts or cryptids. So
Or
awesome.
even weird places like House on the Rock, and
House on the Rock that is right down the road from me, and Frank
yeah,
Lloyd Wright's Taliesin is
yeah,
right down the road from me. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful state, and we love it here. And it's so many great things that you guys, everyone can check out. So again, thank T. This has been amazing. I'd love to have you back on the podcast, and we talk a little bit more about what's coming up there, and kind of
for
get a
sure.
little more into more legends and lores. But anyway, again, thank you so much. We end every show by saying hi to your ghost. Hello, ghost, because you never know. You might have a ghost. And then
Uh,
stay spooky.
all right.
Thanks, T. Have a
Thank
great
you.
one.